Alright, these are gonna be some quick early impressions of the Oblivion Remaster. I played the original ages ago, initially on the Xbox 360, and I still remember a lot of it, especially the things I got frustrated over. But the game is not fresh on my mind, so I don't know if every tree, every piece of furniture and every NPC in the remaster is in the same spot they were in the original. I don't remember all the quests or all the lines of dialogue. It's more so that I remember the gist of it all, and of course I remember how it felt playing the game, the impact the game had when I played it so long ago. So they call this a remaster. All these different, I guess, marketing terms are getting confusing and everyone uses their own definitions. So what is a remaster? What is a remake or a reimagining? When do we speak of an enhanced port? Of course I have my own answers to all of those, for some more clear-cut than for others. When I think of a remaster, I see reworked graphics, so better and higher res textures, maybe a higher polygon count on the character models and some slight modernizations and quality of life enhancements to the systems and mechanics. Like a better button layout, shortcuts, reworked UI, but nothing too substantial, because if too much is reworked and upgraded, the game crosses the line into being a remake. Well, from what I know of this remaster, they reworked all the textures, many of the animations, and even added some. They reworked the UI while still retaining the overall look and handling. They added lines of dialogue for radiant conversations, they changed the level up mechanic, they added a sprinting mechanic with a stamina cost to the movement, and they did it all in a new engine, which makes sense since Gamebryo is very much outdated. More outdated than the rest of Bethesda's work. But they didn't even use their own more recent creation engine 2, but Unreal 5, and so they also involved another studio in the development process. I'm not sure how much of the code and existing work they were able to recycle for this, but no matter how you slice it, there have been a lot, and I mean a lot of improvements and changes to the original game, which makes it more than just a remaster for me. It is sold for €55, and I guess similarly in other territories, which, I mean, it isn't cheap, but it wouldn't have surprised me if it were $70 given the amount of reworks done in the game, and how games are sold these days. Or, I mean, it could cost you as much as 1 month of Game Pass, since all of Bethesda's releases are part of the subscription. They also bundled all the previous DLC into this, which is good. But they couldn't keep themselves from selling additional Day 1 DLC to us, so more quests and special items that just could have been in the game. They even included a new set of horse armor in the premium DLC. I mean, I guess it's somewhat endearing that they make fun of it themselves, but they still try to sell it to us. They still want to take money for it. So it is not just a little joke, a silly little jab at their horrible decisions in the past. It's a repeat of it. But this time I guess a lot of people will clap and laugh and gladly pay for it. Now the first thing everyone notices is the improved visuals. The game looks really nice. Not the most impressive state-of-the-art high-end graphical showcase, but still really nice. Now my recording makes it look more choppy than it actually was in-game. It's due to how OBS works, and it's generally a good thing that my gameplay is as little impacted as possible, but it does lead to some stuttering or unstable frame rate in the video. So yeah, the game runs a lot smoother than it looks in this video, for the most part. It sometimes has some issues on startup or after a loading screen, and you might have to fidget around a bit with the options. But for the most part, it runs really well. The draw distance is as shitty as in the video, and some effects do look weird, and not every texture looks great, and there are some graphical glitches, but it's still one hell of an improvement. Just look at these environments. The new textures look beautiful. All the towns are still the same, but they just look better. Streets and brickwork more detailed. There isn't any more actual detail to be found, it's all in the textures, and especially indoors it appears a bit barren, since we are used to more clutter from more recent open world games. But the towns themselves, like on the streets, are very beautiful, and the new and improved lighting is a large component to that. Now we have actual dynamic lighting that comes from the light source, being it the virtual sun or a torch or one of those glowy things. And with it comes dynamic shadows. Now all those flat looking environments have depth. Shops and taverns now convey a certain warmth, and those ancient ruins have this eerie atmosphere. But I was most impressed with the visuals when I was out in the Cyrodiil wilderness. That's nature's beauty at its finest. It's colorful and detail-rich, and the improved lighting really shines here, quite literally, when you stroll through the forest and see the sun rays between the trees. And just look at the variety of different flowers, trees and grasses. Like, the overall fidelity of the foliage is stunning. It looks really good, and it avoids a certain sameness when you're exploring the outdoors. Like, the color of the grass changes, trees have different bark. There was already something of this in the original, though I'm not sure if the fidelity was this high. I replayed it just a bit to check on a few things, and it did already sport some good fidelity, though the even worse draw distance took away from it quite a bit. So not sure if it's just because of the improved textures that the environment looks more varied, or if they added additional details, but either way, it makes it a joy to behold, especially with all the other little effects. There's bugs scuttering about, insects flying around, leaves falling to the ground. The character models have also been reworked, and while wildlife and monsters look pretty good, I'm not sure if I could call the look of the human characters an improvement. I mean, it's certainly more detailed, the hair definitely looks better, and it's not as plasticky, but to me it just looks weird in a different way. The Emperor looks like he's made out of sponge, and a lot of times the faces still look very goofy. I guess, in a way, it's still very much true to the original game with this. But they added some more and better animations to the dialogues as well, so now NPCs are not getting way too close for comfort in your face anymore and then stiffly stand around, only moving their eyes and mouth. Now they shift from side to side, they bend forwards, they look around. It's sometimes a bit over-animated, but makes conversations more dynamic and more natural. Gameplay-wise, a lot of it has been kept broadly the same, but there have been a few changes. I mean, most of the things are still here. We still got the minigames, so you have to carefully push tumblers during lockpicking and handle the wheel of silliness during conversations. These mostly stayed the same. The persuasion minigame was visually redesigned to make it more clear how much each choice affects the NPC's disposition towards you, and after having attempted it at least once with an NPC, it even gets color-coded, so on following attempts, you don't even have to look at the character's face anymore. It certainly speeds things up, but it also kinda dumbs it down. Not that there ever was that much to it, and it's not that people yearned for a return of this conversation system. But on the flip side, it gives you more to do than in Skyrim, where they just stripped it away. But there's still less to the conversations than we got in Morrowind. But alright, this is a remaster of Oblivion, and this system was, meme-tastic as it may be, still a core element and kind of a staple of the game, so it would be weirdly missing if it was gone. Ingredient gathering got vastly improved. Now the plants and mushrooms you harvest actually disappear from the game world once you've picked them up. It even has a little animation. Now you don't have to check every cluster of shrooms in a dungeon twice or even more often just because they never disappear, even though you can't get anything more from it. Now, in the original it was possible to not get anything from a gathering attempt, but I have yet to see this happening in the remaster. I guess your flower picking attempts now just always succeed, and I don't have any issues with that. When it comes to mixing ingredients though, I do have a problem, and it has to do with how the inventory is organized. In the original game, items were sorted into categories and subcategories. In the remaster, the subcategories are gone, so all consumables are just one bottomless list, and your alchemy tools are somewhere in there between this plant and that potion. The same goes for other tools as well, like your repair hammers, so you can't just easily select them anymore. Depending on how much stuff you have, you need to scroll through a bunch of things to find them. And when you're in the alchemy menu, the problem still persists. The original was very clever in that it removed all ingredients from the list that you couldn't use, since you can only mix ingredients that share at least one of their effects with each other. Now, the remaster just doesn't do this. So have fun scrolling through all your ingredients up and down all the time. You can't filter ingredients by effect, though this comes with another issue, in that it spoils the still unidentified effects of an ingredient, that you aren't even able to utilize at that point. Combat also appeared slightly altered. The animations are better and more elaborate, and maybe it's because of that the fighting feels less erratic. Or maybe something actually has been done to the combat behavior of enemies. Enemies don't just wave their weapons around in your face all the time. They wind up for a strike and move more like you expect of a human. But it also feels like it is now easier to block or avoid attacks. Well, partially. It also seems like the actual attack reach is a lot farther than it looks. So you get hit by an attack even though you think you stepped quite far away from the enemy. So blocking really is your friend here. But it's really not that bad, since you now have regenerating health and also your magic replenishes really fast. In the original, health only replenished on its own while using the sleep or wait action. That wasn't available when there were enemies around. In the remaster, you just have to wait a few seconds after a fight and be back to full, well, everything. This makes the game a lot easier, but it also changes how you use your resources. You don't have to rely as much on restoration magic, especially early on, so if you're not actively trying to increase the skill, it doesn't level as organically as it did in the original. And you also don't need to rely as much on potions. And it seems to me that you, in turn, find fewer actual healing potions, and the effect of healing spells or items also seems to be reduced. A necessary balancing effort for sure. It also helps that the enemy's health indicator is now much clearer, mostly larger, which gives you a better idea as to when the enemy is actually about to die. And also the stealth indicator is clearer. The eye now slowly opens depending on how close an enemy is to detecting you, instead of it just changing transparency. The big change, the major one though, is the leveling system. It got completely overhauled. The skill benefits are still there, you still level up by taking a nap, and even the level up messages stayed the same, but everything else got thrown out and reworked. So in the original, you had to select a number of major skills, and only training those worked towards a level up. All skills had an impact though, because when you raised your level, you were able to pick 3 of your attributes to increase, and the amount of each increase was determined by the skills you raised during that level. So by not really knowing what to do, by experimenting with different solutions, as you do on your first playthrough, you screwed yourself over and had a bunch of low stat increases from which to choose from. It's even worse than the random stat increases in Fire Emblem, because it forces you to play a certain way as to not level your character into a corner. Enemies scale with your level, so suboptimal stat increases made you weaker the more you progressed. And it was horrible and everyone hated it. The new system lets you distribute 12 points with each level up. You still can only increase 3 attributes at a time, but you decide by how much, with a maximum amount of 5 of course. I guess you were able to get a higher increase total per level in the original, but that was mostly just the case for the min-maxers. Now you can min-max without trading it for fun. It does cost more points to increase luck though, but honestly, who even bothers to level luck? Also, now every skill feeds into the level progression, so it doesn't matter what you train anymore. Don't know if this makes it a better system, but it certainly feels more intuitive. And you level a lot faster. The difference between major and minor skills is now just the starting value and how fast they increase. Overall, I appreciate this change, even though I think it makes the game even easier. This wouldn't be an Elder Scrolls game though, if there wasn't a lot of jank. Many of the things we rightfully made fun of for nearly 20 years are still there, and there are even some new things. We still have the nonsensical Radiant dialogues.
And has not been heard from since.
It seems that these are turbulent times in the land of the Dunmer.
Goodbye.
Farewell. You're welcome here.
I avoid those things whenever I can. Horrible creatures.
Farewell.
The useless enemy AI. Or physics objects flopping about. Or how about merchants' funds never decreasing, no matter how much you sell? Or when the name of the location pops up over and over because you took a few steps to either side, not even really leaving the area. And of course you get your fair share of random crashes. I had 3 so far. Yeah, it still is Elder Scrolls. And it still is very much Oblivion. Maybe not to every fan, and certainly not to many purists, but I think it kept the right things, had some welcome changes, and even though not everything was changed for the better, nothing so far has been particularly bad. I'm enjoying my time with the game, and to me it's another example of nostalgia done right. And finally with a 3D game, so I don't have to pick Shovel Knight as an example every time anymore. Well, I guess Dead Space before this was already a very fine example of this, but here the gap is even larger. Aside from the leveling, you wouldn't notice too many mechanics or gameplay changes, if you're not doing a direct comparison or having played the original shortly before. Of course the improved visuals and animations don't look anything like the original, but it gives you the same feeling, like the game feels like it did when you played it nearly 20 years ago. When those graphics looked amazing and the scope of the world was incredible. I guess they could have removed some of the loading zones in the remaster and have you seamlessly enter towns, but I guess that's why it is a remaster, not a remake. Though I did have a Skyrim mod that removed the loading zones between the towns and surroundings, so I don't think this would have been all too much work. It also would have been nice to have some reworked dungeon layouts, so that not everything looked the same. Maybe if changes to the actual layouts were too much work, then they could have at least made a few more art assets to differentiate the copy-pasted chambers a bit more from one another. Nevertheless, it's a fun throwback. Being able to sprint makes the long distances more bearable and disincentivizes fast travel, having you enjoy the exploration even more. Gathering resources is smooth, leveling is now more intuitive, and I mean, everything else is as you remember it. Vaguely remember. It's good fun, and I like it so far. If you have a Game Pass subscription, you can try it there if you don't want to blindly fork over $50, and if you're on PlayStation, good news! You're actually allowed to fork over $50 to play this, which, honestly, was a good decision. So yeah, with that, I wish you a great day. That's it from Rady, and I hope to see you again on the next game.